Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today I'm going to deliver on a promise I made a couple of segments back to tell everybody who the elitists are in the world. We hear many times about the elite taking over the world, or the elite trying to govern everybody, and the elite are the ones that are taking all the money and subjecting all the people in the globe. Who are the elites? Where did they come from? How did they get to be the elites? Well, the elites are members of the World Economic Forum. These are a bunch of self-appointed, self-assigned experts and people who insist on being the leaders of policy throughout the world. And they try to inflict their demands on policy on various governmental leaders. Many of these governmental leaders we talk about are members of the WEF, and they actually attend these meetings of the powerful business people and other factions around the globe that have special interests about things. Now, you can't just show up to one of these things and get in. You have to be invited, sort of like membership in other organizations that we have around the globe, like churches and other political organizations that might want to have their agenda and to keep it to themselves until they put it upon the rest of the population and say, here it is. This is what we decided. This is what's best for you. So you need to do this. So this is how some of these organizations go. They're self-important, self-derived authority that they've placed upon themselves because nobody really objected to them or stood up to them, because they all kind of think, well, you know what you're doing, type of thing. And that's the wrong way to go about stuff, because this is how these people take power, take control, and then go on from there. They start with something small, and then they move into the rest of it. So you've seen it before. You're going to be seeing it again. So the WEF, these are the folks that always meet in Davos. You always hear about the meetings in Davos, if you're paying attention. Well, these are all the rich and powerful and people who are heads of organizations like the International Monetary Fund, heads of state like Manuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, who just was replaced in Canada, Vladimir Zelensky, and another gentleman, just case in point, is a fellow by the name of Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of South Africa. And recently, Klaus Schwab was dismissed as the head of the WEF. And Klaus Schwab had been one of the people that sort of organized all this and started all this stuff and promoted all the initiatives about climate change, along with Barack Obama and his group, the One World Order group. They're all connected. They're all part of the same thing. Another guy who is involved in this on a very intimate level is a fellow by the name of Jamie Dimon, who is the head of Chase Bank here in North America, or actually globally. So he's playing on this level. Another person who is always at these meetings is a fellow named Satya Nadella. He's the head of Microsoft. And Bill Gates is no longer that guy. Gates is just trying to spend his money before he dies. And Gates is really not popular in this group anymore, because he stood out from the crowd and basically said, you know, the emperor has no clothes. The whole thing about the climate change stuff, people aren't going to die. There's not going to be this massive kill-off of people with climate change. Humans are capable of moving several feet higher in elevation in any land mass that they happen to be a part of. So humans are not stuck to the place where they are currently. They can always move if there happens to be water elevation changes or heat may rise a little bit. It's not going to kill people off like they dramatically tried to say. So now that Gates has kind of come around to telling the truth about the story, these other people are saying, well, you're messing with our narrative. You know, we had them, and now you're destroying everything. We don't want you here anymore. So it'll be interesting if Bill Gates is invited to the next meetings coming up. A lot of people insinuate that fellows like Elon Musk are part of this WEF. And Elon Musk basically said that he thinks that they're all boring as F. You know, that these are a bunch of non-doers, just a bunch of wonks. And that goes against Elon Musk's sort of training and how he goes about his business. He doesn't enjoy the company of people who talk about things and do nothing. So he's the kind of guy who's a doer, a shaker, a mover. He doesn't sit still long. And so he has not been invited to any of the meetings, I believe, since 2015. And I don't know if he's been to any of them, maybe once. He got his opinion about how things were going there, and I don't think he's gone back. But one of the people that you really need to pay attention to, and this person is really able to pull a lot of strings around the world at a moment's notice. And that's a woman by the name of Kristalina Georgieva. And she is the director of the International Monetary Fund. And she is very close and tied to all of the board members and the leaders of the different factions at the World Economic Forum. Again, this non-elected, non-endorsed by the public type of thing. These are people that just said they were going to do this on themselves. They says, we got to do this. We're the people. You know, you're cool, you're cool, you're cool. You're not. You stay away. This type of stuff. They're very selective. They only get people in that agree with them. So their bubble or their think tank is flawed from the get-go by not having any opposing ideas or forces at these meetings to encourage reasonable, even reasonable debate about something. They don't have to be spirited. It just has to be reasonable pushback on some of these BS ideas. So the WEF, in its infinite wisdom, has chosen climate change, vaccines, online speech, and free worldwide migration as their topics. They think that these things have to be made available to every person around the world, that they cannot be challenged on their desire to migrate or live in a different country than where they currently reside. This is one world order stuff. And this is no borders. This is no national or national no nations exist unto themselves, but no national authority to reject growth within their borders. This is where they're taking away the rights and privileges of nations to rule themselves. Because if they don't submit to their globalist ideas and agendas here with this WEF, then they need to be sanctioned. They need to be put out of business as whatever means they can with their tools and levers that they can pull to mend and cure society's evils, which many times is them, is producing these evils. So let's go and talk about these things. So climate change, yeah, it's all BS. There's something going on, but it's not nearly as dramatic as they want to say. Vaccines, yeah, there's some credibility to it, but bring us a vaccine and we'll look at it. The COVID thing, that was never a vaccine. You want a vaccine? Look at polio. The polio vaccine is a vaccine. The COVID vaccine was a therapeutic. It was never a vaccine. They lied when they said, you take the vaccine, you can't spread it anymore, it kills it in you. It was all a lie. They knew it. They knew it when they said it. But they said it anyway because they wanted your, what we want to say, compliance. That's a kind word. These folks don't think much of anything about you, me, and the other guy. They think we're stupid. They think we can't make decisions like they can in themselves. This narcissistic society they put together, they don't think much of you, me, or the other guy. They don't appreciate you, but they need you. They need us to keep them in their rank rather than pulling them down off their towers. They really don't think much of the common person on the face of the earth. They think that they're too incapable of leading themselves. This is the kind of thing that one Margaret Sanger talked about back in the 1920s about people with dark skin in this country, in the United States, when she started Planned Parenthood. And she thought she was being so gracious and helpful, and what she was doing was really condescending to people of color, especially the blacks, because she decided that black people were incapable of raising children because they were inferior. And the best thing we could do for them was to eliminate their ability to procreate and have more children, and we would just end it. And so there wouldn't be this scourge upon our society. This was Margaret Sanger. This was the Planned Parenthood. And this is one of the reasons that Planned Parenthood has been so effective in this country and others of helping to eliminate unborn babies, especially babies of color, when they want to consider it Plan B as a procreation form of birth control. And this is all dastardly, it's devious, it's demonic in its design, but it's been carried through and it's been normalized and it's made part of our society. And there's people that fight for the right to do that, not understanding how it got there in the first place. And in a lot of ways, they don't care. They really don't care. They only care about what makes them feel good and makes them feel like they have the power, even though it's a false sense of security that they're working with. And that's what happens in the Planned Parenthood. So that sort of ideology and that test case has worked dramatically well for these folks, and they're using it in other areas. And let me talk about that. So they're getting into now online speech. The WEF, and in its infinite wisdom, and the United Nations are pushing that the United Nations can have ultimate control over speech online around the globe. They will determine what is information and disinformation based upon their agenda, not what a free-thinking population might think or want to discuss or debate. They want to close all that down. There will be no debate about these things. We will shut it down. We will not allow you to say things that go against what we determine to be truthful and helpful. And even if it is full of truth, they're going to deny it and put it down. So they want to be able to control all of online speech. They want to be able to control and eliminate countries from having borders where people are checked and turned away and not allowed to enter a country. They think that that is illegal on a worldwide basis, a world citizen type of thing. So they're going to start using these types of words, citizen of the world type of thing, that you can't stop me from being a human on this planet, and suspending states' rights and obligations to the rest of their citizens and population. So these are the things that the folks at the WEF want to enforce. And ways they want to enforce it is through the use of digital ID. Now, they've already had a sort of a test run on the digital ID in the form of a upgraded ID here in this country now. If you want to fly on a plane, that you have to have the upgraded individual identification card, your driver's license or whatever. So if you haven't flown, if you want to fly, you got to get the secondary upgraded ID, or you've got to bring extra paperwork with you, like a birth certificate and other things, so you can have secondary corroboration of your identity at the TSA as you're trying to load through security. So this digital ID, though, they want it, and they're going to make it sound like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're going to sell it to you as being a convenience for you. We're not doing this for us. This is all for you, to make things easier for you to navigate in this world and to do things. Well, it's going to be easier for you because they're going to be putting more restrictions on other things. And one of the things that they want to put a restriction on is your ability to comment or post things online, whether it be Facebook or YouTube videos or anything that you want to comment on. If it's going to be going on the internet, they want to make sure that your transparency is evident. They want to make sure that everyone can know who you are, that there can't be any anonymity anymore on the internet because it's too dangerous. This is what they've decided in their infinite wisdom at the WEF. So they want to have this digital ID. And this digital ID then also goes with a test pilot situation that they are starting now in Canada with a new sort of digital currency and a social scoring system that determines if you are eligible to make a purchase of something. So they're going to start describing what it is that you can buy, depending on what your social score is, the same type of thing they've been doing in China for a number of years. So they've tested the system. They know it can work. They just have to get your compliance, and they have to sell it to you as something that's going to give you convenience. When what it's actually doing is turning over all of your records, all of them. You will have nothing safe anymore unless you're storing it underneath your mattress and never tell anybody about it. This is where it's getting back to, a sort of quiet takeover of you and your individuality, because the word now is not individuality rights, it's more about collectivism. And this was said the other day by Mamdani in New York, trying to change the narrative, making collectivism sound like it's a great thing, when collectivism is just another word for Marxism and putting you down and making you basically a ward of the state. This is all going to go to trying to take away property rights, take away anything that you own as far as that. You're going to rent things from now on. You won't own cars. You will rent them. If they want it back, they'll take it. If they want to take your car, they will. They're trying to eliminate personal liberties as far as travel with ease types of things. And this is one way that they want to try to put down the individual perspective of people around the globe and make them more of like this one world order group. So they take little bites at the apple that you don't notice as it's happening, and then they expand on it when the time is right. And this is their playbook. This is what's going on. So with this digital currency and digital ID, it's going to block your ability to take flights, do online comments and posting, even shipping letters and packages through the post office or UPS or any of these other delivery services, that you'll have to have this digital ID that ensures that the person sending this is perfectly safe and not sending something dangerous through the system. And they're just trying to track what you're doing, how you're doing it, and where you're doing it. And they're going to be blocking, like I said, your ability to buy things based on your social score that's coming about, that they will determine how these scores are made. And it's just getting, it's not quite dystopian yet, but it's getting very, very close to that. And the WEF always sets up a decades-long initiative. In 2020, they set one forward, and that a lot of it had to do with the Green New Deal types of things that they were trying to run through here in the United States, but more about the climate change stuff. And I think that Bill Gates probably had to have a moment of clarity when he realized, even I can't, keep putting up with this charade. This whole climate change thing, it was all BS. And he came out and said that that's got him to be uninvited to a lot of things right now, which is probably in his best interest, whether he knows it or not. But back to one of these other members, these world leaders I talked about being a member of the WEF, and that is Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa. And I had an unusual situation come up the other week. I was hosting a meeting of a number of globalist-type businessmen at my home. They decided they wanted to come to my place because they thought it had a certain feeling and a certain ability for them to have multiple meetings going on in the same place at the same time due to my layout of my home. They liked the isolation that it offered, so they asked if they could have their meeting here, and I agreed. And in the course of that meeting, one of the gentlemen was having a spirited discussion with a gentleman from South Africa. And I wasn't really paying really close attention to what was going on, but I was seated nearby and I was having other discussions. And in the midst of this, the gentleman on the phone who was having this discussion, he hands me his telephone. He says, "Here, talk to my friend in South Africa. You know, I've got to go take care of something." And so he left the room and handed me the phone, and I started having this, you know, interesting conversation with this guy I'd never met before. And so I asked him, I said, "Well, who are you and why am I talking to you right now?" And he says, "Well, I don't know, but he says, I work for the president of South Africa. I'm his chief legal advisor." And I go, "Oh." I said, "Isn't that Ramaphosa?" And he goes, "Yes." And these guys were talking about mining rights and things like that were going on, so that's why they were talking to this attorney. And so with this attorney, he actually mentioned the World Economic Forum and things that he was going to be asked to present at one of their upcoming meetings this year. And I said, "Well, that's very interesting." I said, "Didn't they just eliminate Klaus Schwab as the head of that group?" And he goes, "Yeah, they did." He says, "But the reason they gave wasn't the real reason why he was dismissed and put down and replaced." And I said, "Well, could you share what that was?" He says, "Yeah, I'd be glad to." He wasn't being tough enough on Western countries. He wasn't being tough enough on the United Kingdom, which has been folding as we speak, and quite considerably these last 5 years. It's been folding its tent. But he was ridiculed for not being tougher on the United States and pulling some of more of its levers with like the Jamie Dimons and the Kristalina Kristalina Georgieva. Georgieva is the head of the IMF. And the WEF wasn't putting enough pressure on these people to put pressure on the United States. But they were coming up against the buttress, that being Donald Trump and his administration. And so these folks at the WEF can't stand somebody to block their agenda because it goes against their ideas, their ideology, and their sunken costs that they have into all of this. They are on a track. If they don't succeed, they plan on dying trying. And this is not a safe place to be when you've got these people pulling these strings out there that aren't elected. They're self-assigned, and they're doing whatever it is they want to do, changing the rules on the fly and saying, you need to come to the problem. So the same thing is going on here is the same thing that's going on in church administrations throughout the world and governance about these churches, whether it be the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Methodist Church. All these things are changing right before our eyes, and they're making little changes along the way to the bigger change. And so this is not a good place to be. You have to be very, very watchful. Do not do the digital ID if you don't have to. If you do the digital ID, you are basically unveiled to everything, and you are going to be susceptible to further encroachments on your rights and privileges as you live out your life. So try to go against the digital ID, and also be careful about your 401k. And why do I say that? Well, a lot of people have 401ks, and they're very tied to the success and the number that they have on their 401k. What's the value of it? And I have to ask some of these people, I said, well, what's in your 401k? He says, well, I have a lot of stocks because that's the growth curve that I need to be on. So most everything I have is into stocks. And I said, how many stocks do you own? He goes, well, I don't know. It's all in the 401k. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you, you own no stock. You have no rights or privileges in the ownership of any stock in your 401k. And the reason being is that in 1999, President Bill Clinton started an agency called the DTC to add a convenience layer to investors, that they didn't have to individually go through and pick their stocks and manage their stocks in their 401k. This is a convenience for the people. This is going to make things easier because they're too stupid to be able to do this on their own. So we're going to do it for them through the DTC. So what happens at the DTC? Well, the DTC is a lot like the digital ID that the WEF wants to put out there. The DTC is an organization that takes your money that you put into the 401k through your company matching assets, whatever it might be. Whatever that money gets invested in there, and you say stocks, the DTC goes out, takes your money, goes and buys a stock, and the stock remains in their name, the DTC, not yours. You get a number which says what your perceived value is of your fund at that moment. It can go up, it can go down. And this causes a nervous point of contention for a lot of people with 401ks in a troubled economy. They're always working, oh, your 401k is going to fall, your 401k is going to fall. Well, it depends on what the DTC does with your investment money as they're holding your stocks, or their stocks, I should say. You've got a number. You own nothing. So what do they do with the stock now that the DTC owns? They leverage it. They go out and they borrow against it, and they return this money back to other government slush funds that the president and the administrations can use at will. So you really own nothing in your 401ks if you're into stocks. So what you need to do is diversify, and you need to be into other things, or you need to pull your money out of the 401k and put it into some sort of hard asset like gold and silver, or your own stocks and get a stock certificate. If you don't have a stock certificate or a number that goes to a stock certificate electronically, you own nothing, but you have a number. And that number can change, and it can all be taken away if people like this decide to do so. If they need your money or they need your land, they will take it. And that's one of the things that they want to do with having you say, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. The U.S. government has leveraged itself to the hilt. It has no more leveraging power, or little, if anything, left with the land that it actually holds and the assets of the United States government. I mean, we're talking about a $30+ trillion debt, and we are leveraged over that amount. And so the government has really nothing more to leverage. So what they have to do is start leveraging you and your assets. And this is why they want to come after in this new age, in this new era of thinking about things, this progressive thought, is that you will own nothing. The government will own your land, you will pay rent, and they will decide if you can maintain your presence on the land that you are renting, depending on what your social score is, and these other things that they're going to derive out of your digital ID, whatever they decide. This isn't fabrication, this is fact, this is what's going on. And if you read between the lines when they talk about things, this is what they're talking about. And when I was discussing things with this gentleman from South Africa the other day on the phone, a high-level, executive in the state government there in South Africa, he confided in me that with their gold reserves, that they have tons and tons and tons of gold that is on reserve right now from their many mines that they have. And they've been hoarding gold because gold is going up. Gold right now is around $4,600 an ounce. They fully expect it to go to $7,000 an ounce. And he told me, he says, we're not releasing any tonnage of gold into the world market until the price hits $7,000. And why would they? They may only have to, wait another half a year or whatever, or even shorter if there's a major, issue comes up, bigger than what we already have. They can go from $4,600 to $7,000 on a motion very quickly. So they understand what is going on, and he also understands what the WEF is doing because his boss is one of these wonks at the WEF. And one of the things he confided in me was that Klaus Schwab was not dismissed for improprieties in spending, with budget monies and stuff like that on spa treatments and things like this that he was doing that they said he wasn't entitled to. The folks at the WEF do not give a damn about money. So the whole thing about him having misappropriating funds and things like that was all a lie. Nobody there cares about money because money isn't what drives them. Power and access and compliance from the individuals is what drives them. That's their currency. Money is a non-issue. So this whole thing about money was all a lie, but it was all about that he wasn't being strong enough in his attacks and his work against Western countries, that being the United States in particular. So the lies are all around us, this disinformation that they want to talk about, that they have to control, and here they're, releasing all this disinformation themselves. This is troubling, and we have to watch it. You have to be, on your toes about this because they're getting real slippery and they're getting really evasive about answering some of these things. So that's the story on who the elitists are. So be careful out there, and remember, I love you, and I'll be back.